You can read my throwback. I can do the throwback.
Where are the other council members?
Yeah, well, we need some council members.
Where the other council members are? Renault 11?
Eric, have you seen the other council
Antonio!
members?
Antonio!
They're important to this.
Being here. Welcome
Are you
back.
having fun?
Welcome back.
Only good things happen.
I know.
This is where we had some fun.
This is where you made the.
Yes.
I can't wait to do Zone's Way, something serious. Like I'm the mayor.
Yeah, no, it's going to be incredible.
It's going to be a big deal.
Oh man, I need water.
For being here.
They don't have any here, but
The woman. Yes. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Joe.
Joe.
All right.
Sure, I have another phone in here that probably will go right in the
You are the one. Everyone good? Everyone ready?
Everyone's ready?
Okay,
Yep.
take it
yeah,
away.
we're all here.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Say it
My-
again.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Concepcion Bosque. I arrived from the Dominican Republic at the age of 11 years old, and I came to the South Side in South 2nd, 367. It was one of the neighborhoods that no one wanted to be in. I remember in my building, we had a gang living above us, and we were 9 brothers and sisters, 6 sisters. Walking the street at that time was not something that you really wanted to do. I remember my father not allowing us to go and play outside. So I don't know what that life is to play outside because of the danger that we had. Just last night, we were having dinner in my house, and I have a daughter that is 29 and a son that is 26, and we were telling him this story just last night, how this community was, because they don't believe it, of course. And my sister, that is now 44, that was born in that building, was telling them, yes, when I was walking from school, I almost got raped one day. And I was not able, I had to hide in a pizza store until someone came to pick me up. And I was glad that we shared this story with my young son, because they need to live where they need to know where they are and where his parents come from and what we have done to this community. We have done so much to turn this community around. I remember so many rallies that we have done, and we have spoken to councilmen after councilmen, community leaders, to get our neighborhood a decent place to live. I tell my kids, you will not believe that there were no trees on this street. Mom, are you really saying that? Yes, there were no trees on the street. And now we have this beautiful view that we can go. So we have gone a long way, but one problem that we still face is the garbage in our street. And that needs to stop. We cannot continue like this in such a beautiful neighborhood. As long as I can remember, you know, the street were a pile of garbage and rats and danger, a lot of danger. But look now, look where we are. Look at this building. We are so proud to be here. I just went to the school that is like a couple of blocks here, called Eastern District at that time, one of the worst schools in the neighborhood. And look at today. But now, we have families, and you also walk here, and you saw how our street look. The streets are beautiful, the buildings are beautiful, but the garbage is still there. Why should garbage be our problem only? It's the question that we always ask, and we continue asking. Why is that our problem? I work in a daycare. I hope some of you know Nuestros Niños Daycare Center in South 4th Street.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we are celebrating 44 years this year. And I have to thank Mr. de Blasio because he helped us save that building when we were losing it. And we fought and we got it. And Antonio Reynoso, of course. In that building, we have many families and children coming day by day. We get these children when they are 3 months old until they are in pre-kindergarten. These children walk the streets. Their parents walk the streets, the parents, the providers, and they have to just see this day by day, all this garbage. And sometimes I wonder, what can we teach the children about cleaning at home if our streets are such a mess, right? It's very hard for a teacher or an educator to teach about this. I see the young children in our school already afflicted with asthma. We have an asthma program coming to the center because we have so many children suffering from this. And every day I worry about these kids and their family. Thousands of garbage trucks barreling down our streets. You can see the spotlights. Garbage trucks after garbage truck line up. If you live here, you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. You can smell the exhaust. You can smell the trash. You can't escape it. It's right there. Our kids deserve better than that. They have bright futures ahead of them. I know this because one of our graduates, who we are very proud of, my councilman, is sitting right here at this table. Yes, he was a little baby. He was only 2. Neighborhood just like ours have mobilized and fought this injustice for years. We do it for our children. It is time to right the wrong. Thanks to our hero, Councilman Reynoso, Antonio, and the leadership of Mayor de Blasio and Speaker Johnson, we are finally going to have fairness. This is about justice. Racial, social, and environment justice. And it is now my honor to introduce our Mayor de Blasio.
Thank you. Concepcion, I want to say I really appreciate what you said because this is about a community that stood up and fought for justice. And I want to thank everyone here because this is your victory. This is your victory. And Concepcion, you said it so powerfully, and I know you have fought this fight so well. Let's thank her for all she has done. I want to thank all of the community members who are here. I can tell you because I remember the town hall meeting we had in this very center. This is one of the most energetic, active communities anywhere in New York City, and I commend you. And people care and they do something about it. And I want to thank some of the organizations that have played a crucial role in bringing us to this day, one that is historic in what it's done for this community and for the city, El Puente. Let's thank everyone from El Puente. And another organization, I admired their work. I also admire how they came up with a name that spelled something that made total sense. The organization is the Organization United for Trash Reduction and Garbage Equity, which spells, as an acronym, is known as outrage. So, when we think about this issue, I want to give you a way of thinking about it. Everyone's lived through it. But I want us to be able to talk about this to all the people of New York City. And I want to give you an example that you can picture in your mind. So rather than talk about one neighborhood, a different neighborhood, all these technical terms, I want to make it very human, very direct. I want you to picture in your mind 2 houses. And one house is fancier, and it has a big fence around it. And the other house is more humble. And the people from the big fancy house, when they put their garbage together at the end of the day, they just throw it over the fence into the yard of the more humble house. And then they don't have to look at it. And because they don't have to look at it, they act like it doesn't exist. So one house gets a yard full of garbage, and the other house acts like there's not a problem. That is an analogy that we could bring to the reality of our city. Because for a long, long time, there was not an honest enough discussion about the fact that we all created garbage, but only some neighborhoods had to deal with it. And that was never right. This has been a problem for decades. It is a fundamental question of justice, and what we have seen is persistent injustice. The fact that it was based, as Concepcion said, in structural racism and economic injustice should make us even more upset. Here is a statistic that makes it very, very clear. Just 6% of all New Yorkers deal with almost 75% of the garbage from the entire city. And this community has been the hardest hit. So this is a fundamentally broken situation, and let's face it, the government for too many years was a part of it. I do want to say that started to change in the previous administration, and I want to give them credit for that, and I agreed with them and supported them in that. We are deepening that effort, and today is an important point along the road. This legislation, and we'll come to Councilmember Reynoso shortly, but he has been extraordinary in his advocacy. This legislation marks a turning point. This legislation marks a turning point, but not an end of this fight.
Right.
This is an important step, and there will be more in the future. And the essence of what we all have to do is reduce the amount of garbage for everyone. So the burden is lightened because the supply is reduced. We got a lot of work to do, but what we are doing today that is profoundly progressive, philosophically progressive, but also showing actual progress, is that we're saying we no longer accept the notion that if you happen to be poor or you happen to have darker skin, that all the garbage goes to your neighborhood. Those days have to end in this city. People should not have to deal with everything Concepcion just mentioned. We know about the trucks and the noise. We know about the fumes, the smell, and the danger of respiratory diseases like asthma. We have to address all this. Again, the very best way will be constantly reducing the amount of garbage for all of us. But what is so good about today is, to go back to that analogy of one house with the fence around it, we're tearing that fence down. We're saying every neighborhood has a responsibility. And we're saying that it's not out of sight, out of mind. Again, that whole history for decades of saying, well, it's someone else's problem we don't need to know about. No. It's all of our responsibility. And this law makes so clear it's all of our responsibility. That, to me, is what is so powerful. It's not also just about what it'll mean for future years and future generations. It's what it's going to mean in the near term. For people in Hunts Point and Mott Haven and Port Morris in the Bronx, they're going to see change right away. For people in Jamaica, Queens, they're going to see change right away. For people in Greenpoint and right here in Williamsburg, you will see change. Hundreds of fewer trucks per day across all of those communities. And that will make life better. But you will also have the assurance that the number of trucks can't grow anymore. because now there's a rule and a limit once and for all. The law I'm signing today makes very clear there will be no new waste transfer stations in any community board that already handles more than 10% of the city's garbage, period.
Yes.
We've said a lot of times the mission we're all on over these next 4 years is to make this the fairest big city in America. To become a more fair and just city, we have to acknowledge our problems, we have to be honest about them, and then we have to do things that set really clear standards. That's what we're doing today, and it's the kind of thing that makes me so proud of us as New Yorkers. We are able to come to grips with the mistakes of the past and do something that will fundamentally change this city for the better. Everyone deserves a congratulations today. Before I turn to Speaker Johnson, a few very quick words in Spanish. Durante demasiado tiempo, un pequeño número de vecindarios han tenido que vivir con la basura de toda la ciudad. Es injusto, es inseguro y tiene que terminar. Hoy estoy firmando una ley para que la forma en que nuestra ciudad maneja la basura sea más justa para todos. And that is the goal, to create something more fair for everyone. And as I turn to Speaker Johnson, I want to say he has been an extraordinary partner in this work and shares the same impulse for fairness and justice and the same sense of urgency. And Speaker, it's been quite a few weeks. City Council has been very busy, and you have struck quite a few blows for working people in the last few weeks. So my congratulations. Let's welcome Speaker Corey Johnson.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It is really great. Really great to be here in Williamsburg today. This has been a long time coming, for more than a decade. As you'll hear from Steve and Antonio, versions of this legislation have been debated in the City Council. 3 council speakers, 2 mayors, multiple council members that represent this area, and 12 years in the making. And many people have worked really hard to make this a reality. So before I talk about the substance of what the council produced and what Mayor de Blasio is signing into law, I want to thank some of the people who helped make this happen. To Mayor de Blasio, I want to thank you for your partnership and for signing this bill into law today. To the advocates, thank you all for your tireless efforts. Thank you very much. And I really want to just heap extra praise. I have 2 very close friends in the council, and they're both sitting up here on this dais. Antonio Reynoso and Steve Levin, you have been laser focused on this issue since joining the council. Antonio, you more than 4 years ago. Steve, you almost 9 years ago, in trying to seek justice for these communities. And it is no exaggeration for those of you who are lucky enough to live in their districts. It is no exaggeration. You should really know that before I was even sworn in as Speaker, Steve and Antonio came to me and said, we need an assurance that this bill will finally move forward so that our neighborhoods and communities finally have the justice that they deserve. So without both of you, we would not be here today. Thank you so much, Antonio, and thank you to Steve. This is what really public service is all about, and their aim from the beginning was to create equity in a facet of city life that for decades there had been little to none. North Brooklyn, the South Bronx, and southeastern Queens has for generations been the dumping ground for the city's waste. And it is no coincidence, and it is not lost on my esteemed council colleagues, that these parts of the city, as the mayor said, are predominantly populated by black and brown people who have struggled every day to make ends meet and keep their families safe. For decades, people have recognized this fact. People of goodwill and good intentions have demanded change, have demanded that the city's refuse be handled in a more equitable way, and today we are taking that step forward, a step to right this very long-standing wrong that has existed. This law will place a limit on the amount of trash moving in and out of neighborhoods that for years have taken on an unfair burden. It will also, in the cases of some of these facilities in those neighborhoods, reduce the amount of waste being trucked into those neighborhoods. But this has never been just about where garbage gets hauled to. It's also about air pollution. It is about dangerous truck traffic. It's about noise. And it's about innocent children suffering from asthma. This bill will begin to put a dent in those negative effects as well. Like much of what we do in government, it is not the last word or a magic pill or a cure-all, though. This is a move forward to be sure, but we still have work to do in how we deal with waste in the city. And that is why I am so excited to work with your council member and our sanitation chair, Antonio Reynoso, Commissioner Garcia, and Mayor de Blasio on looking at a zoned collection for commercial waste in New York City to finally bring even greater equity for the entire city of New York. Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Garcia, I want to tell you again, Antonio Reynoso came to me and said, when are we getting this done? And I studied up on it, and I want to say that we are going to get this done. We will get this done. It will cut the distance garbage trucks have to drive significantly. It will mean less pollution, less noise, and reduced likelihood of pedestrians and garbage haulers getting injured. I am really, really proud of what we've accomplished so far. I'm honored that I've had an opportunity to be part of it. I look forward to continuing this work. I want to thank you all, and I really want to say that there's something deeply satisfying about working with all affected parties and resolving an issue that had festered for a long time and seeing it into the end. Steve Levin was kind enough. He was the #1 prime sponsor on this bill. But because of the work that Antonio had done as sanitation chair, he handed the bill over to Antonio to make him the prime sponsor on the bill so that Antonio would be #1. And so this really was a group team effort, and I am so proud of everyone. Thank you very much.
So we have been doing a lot of work. We have a lot more work to do, but throughout it all, our sanitation commissioner, I think, has done an extraordinary job of running a very big, complex agency that does so many different things, and I want to thank her for all the work that the men and women of sanitation do. And they deserve our praise and our appreciation. Sometimes they get it, often they are not given their due. I always like to give them praise, and I especially want to thank them for the extraordinary work they've done recently during snowstorms, which I think has made us the envy of the whole country. But she has been a powerful voice for equity, too. And it's not always easy to make these big changes, but one thing I really appreciate about Catherine Garcia, she has always been up to the mission. And so I know when the speaker said a lot of people put in a lot of hard work, no one put in more work than our commissioner. So, Commissioner, we welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio, and thank you to the speaker. Am I not on? Oh, I am on. And the council for their work on this bill. Let me also echo that the council members who represent this area never gave up and persisted and persisted and persisted through probably 7 or 8 versions until we ended up with passing this piece of legislation. But there are certainly times when I would have been unsurprised if they threw up their hands and said, I just can't get this done. But that is not the people who represent you. They have always been trying to make sure they can make it better in this community and in the communities of the South Bronx and Southeastern Queens. This bill is truly about waste equity and about beginning to right more than 2 decades of wrongs for these communities. Intro 157C, which just suggests there have been versions, cuts permitted capacity of the amount of waste that transfer stations can accept by 50% here in North Brooklyn and by 33% in the South Bronx and Southeast Queens. Today, right now, we are a mile away from at least 4 transfer stations in northern Brooklyn. These cuts will take effect starting in October of 2019 and continue on a rolling basis and complete in September of 2020. In real terms, that means these communities will have on average 150 fewer garbage trucks per day bringing garbage into their neighborhoods and about 60 fewer tractor trailers hauling waste out. The bill includes exemptions that reward transfer stations that recycle more, accept organic waste, and export waste by rail or barge. These stations are critical to our efforts to send zero waste to landfills. It also prohibits the city from increasing permitted capacity or allowing new transfer stations in any district that has 10% of the city's total capacity. That means no new neighborhoods end up in the same situation as North Brooklyn, the South Bronx, or Southeastern Queens. This is not the only step we are taking to achieve fairness and equity. This fall, we will open the Southwest Marine Transfer Station, and in the spring, the East 91st Street Marine Transfer Station, the last 2 pieces of our comprehensive solid waste management plan. Together, these measures will bring much-needed relief to Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and the other neighborhoods that have borne an unfair burden for far too long. Lastly, I just want to thank the activists and organizers, many of whom have fought for several decades for their tireless work to bring justice to their communities. We wouldn't be here today without your dedication and hard work, and you certainly, definitely kept our nose to the grindstone to make sure this got done. Thank you very much.
Amen. So, Antonio's a pretty righteous guy. If you spend time around him, you learn that very quickly. And I love what you said, even though I think most people don't like to hear that you knew them when they were 2 years old. He is of and by and for the community. And he's worked really, really hard to bring us to this day. So what a pleasure to introduce Councilmember Antonio Reynoso.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody was sitting, so I'm going to sit, but I want to stand up. But I just want to start before my talking points. My son Alejandro is here with my wife. So cute. And it just speaks to why we fight. A lot of these changes and effects that are going to happen are not going to be for us, the people fighting, but it's going to be for the future, our children. And that's why we fight, and that's why we continue to progress. So I just want to say the mayor and Corey. First, I want to start off by saying the mayor made a commitment about a year ago that he would sign this piece of legislation into law. All he needed was for it to come to this table right here. That's important to note because politically, this was a very challenging piece of legislation. Councilmember Diana Reyna tried to pass this several times and couldn't get a veto-proof number of about 34 because then Mayor Bloomberg said he would not sign it into law, that he would veto it. So she couldn't get to the number to get it passed. Once Mayor de Blasio said he's going to pass it, that number went from 34 to 26. We just needed just enough council members to support this, and he was going to sign it. So that was very important to the path and the progression of making this happen. So I want to thank Mayor de Blasio for that commitment. And his promise is kept. Promise is kept. Also, this story might not get as much airtime as, let's say, the off-topic questions that'll happen hereafter. But we have to recognize the work that this mayor has done in these type of issues that'll go unheard for years. But he did it, and he helped our community, and I'm always going to remember that, and this community is always going to remember that. So again, I just want to thank you, Mayor de Blasio, for what you've done. Corey Johnson, the Corey Johnson, our speaker. Corey sat with me and said, Antonio, what is it that you care about? I said, Intro 157, I want that thing to pass. And he said, it's done. We're passing it. This is the right thing to do. This did not have universal support. This speaker has been in office for less than 7 months. And he's already passed a piece of legislation that didn't get 45 votes or straight across the board support from the city of New York. He's done that several times. He's putting his neck on the line to take on controversial bills that he thinks are the right thing to do. That is not an easy thing to do, and he's committed to it. And because of him, we only had 19 people sign on to this bill. But because of him, it turned into 34 overnight. So I want to thank Speaker Johnson for his leadership. Now I got a couple of things that I want to bring up here, if my staff could come up. These are interns from my office. Give them a round of applause. All right. The second shirt. Somebody has the second shirt, if you can find it. There you go. He has a second one. They're ready. Outrage is ready.
Stand up.
All right. I could just talk loudly without having to lean forward.
Strong voice.
First, these are 2 shirts. They say outrage on them. And at this moment, Mayor de Blasio and Speaker Johnson are now honorary members of Outrage. So we want to give you these shirts.
He's extra large. There you go.
Yeah, you guys got to turn it around. Turn it around. It has the no trash.
Yeah.
Then we have 2 gifts. They're all under $50. Don't worry. Okay. That was from Outrage, and this is from. So here, I wanted to pop a bottle of champagne, but I don't think the optics would have been nice. So what we have is a Brooklyn cupcake, which is a great cupcake, and is. But it's mojito. It's mojito, but it has no alcohol in it. But it has it's mojito. So I wanted to give this to the mayor for what I consider a sweet victory for our community. So I wanted to give you that.
There you go. There you go,
It's coquito, not mojito. Coquito.
Okay.
All right.
I was going to say.
So this next one is, since Corey Johnson has been speaker, he's been running wild, passing progressive pieces of legislation, going to war with just about every entity that you can imagine that he believes does harm to this city. And he's been fighting for our district, and we're not afraid of fighting. We got Swinging 60s, which is an organization of seniors. And they're, obviously, if they're swinging, they're fighting for something. Our Congresswoman, Nydia Velasquez, is La Luchadora, which is fighter in Spanish. So I wanted to give these boxing gloves to Speaker Corey Johnson. They have drawings and a design put together by El Puente, and it speaks to just environmental justice for all. So I want to just give this to Corey so he could help him out with the fights.
Yes.
I hope I never have to use these on you.
Yeah.
Woo! And It's important to start that way because as a community, we have to thank the people that really showed up and put the work in and recognize it, and that's why I wanted to do that. And that is on behalf of Councilmember Steve Levin and I to two fighters that have fought for us. So thank you again. Just wanted to make sure you knew we have a lot of love for you out here. Now, for decades, this community has suffered from the impacts of environmental racism. Year after year, black and brown people in Williamsburg across the city have had to fight against the notion that somehow we are less deserving of a safe and clean environment than our white and more affluent neighbors. In my district, we have suffered with toxic conditions created by decades of heavy industrial uses, oil spills, and the reason why we are here today, the highest concentration of waste transfer stations in the city. These transfer stations attract thousands of trucks to my district and to my community. They're spewing toxic fumes into our air and on their way to dump. Our children breathe these fumes from birth. Woodhull Hospital, which serves my district, has the highest rate of admissions for asthma of any hospital in the city of New York. Our seniors have to dodge 40,000-ton trucks barreling down the streets at high speeds. 72-year-old Leo Clark of the Bronx was killed in one of these encounters just a few months ago. Putting an end to this disturbing inequity has been one of our primary goals since I've been working in government. I knew that the city of New York could never live up to its progressive ideals when such a deeply unfair situation was unfolding in our streets every single day. I promised myself that one day I would be able to come back to the neighborhood that raised me and tell the parents of our kids that we created a safer, fairer environment for them to grow up in. I proudly stand before you today to say that this day has finally come.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Intro 157 will finally provide communities in North Brooklyn, the South Bronx, and Southeast Queens a measure of relief and security. Furthermore, it will ensure that no other community in the city of New York can ever become like this one. It is not fair for North Brooklyn to process 38% of the city's trash, just as it wouldn't be fair if we had 38% of the city's parks, even though I wouldn't complain, Mayor de Blasio. Or 38% of the city's affordable housing stock. This is a matter of basic equity. In Williamsburg, we know that our community will continue to process the most trash in the city for the foreseeable future. We are simply asking others to step up and do their part. It has been a difficult and emotional road to bring about this basic measure of fairness to these communities. There are literally dozens of people who have worked tirelessly to make today a reality. I want to thank former Councilmember Diana Reyna, who is not here with us today. She, alongside Steve Levin, introduced this during Speaker Quinn's time. Councilmember Steve Levin, who's continued to revive it term after term after term, under Speaker Melissa Margarito, was an invaluable partner to moving it forward. So I just want to thank Councilmember Steve Levin, my partner in crime. And to my colleagues who supported the legislation, even at great political risk to themselves. Future generations can breathe easier because of their courage. I want to thank Zara for the Progressive Caucus. Sanitation Committee staff who's here today, Nicole, Nadia, John, Cullen, they're all here. They work tirelessly in the background. I want to thank them for their work. Someone who's not here because the mayor stole her from me, Lacey Tauber, who is...
Sorry.
She's gone on to greener pastures in HPD, but she was working tirelessly to make this happen for the 5 years that she worked in my office, and I just want to thank her, and I also want to thank my current legislative director, Asher Freeman, who's standing here, for continuing the work. This dais right here, this lineup is beautiful because we have a diverse group of people that have fought for this. I want to thank the Teamsters who have stood by us the whole time. The New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, or NEJA, I want to thank them for their work as well. All right, now I'm going to roll off the next ones, all right? New York Lawyers for Public Interest, National Resource Defense Council, Outrage, El Puente, Los Sures, Clean Up North Brooklyn, Churches United, and other community groups and residents who organized, testified, and did the research to show just how inequitable the current system is. We could have never done this without you. The reporters who got people to pay attention to this issue. So I want to first thank all the media that's here for all the great work that you do. Kira Feldman, who broke the sanitation salvage story. I don't know if she's here. Danielle Muyo, who tracked this bill's progress in the council. I think the only person that did that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle.
Errol Lewis, who called me in to talk trash. Very happy to do that. Thank Errol Lewis. And again, I want to thank Mayor de Blasio, Commissioner Garcia, who announced their support for this bill a year ago in this very room and have actually followed through, and I thank you for that. Speaker Corey Johnson, you have shown an incredible amount of integrity, content, character, and leadership in getting us to this point. Without your commitment to environmental justice and basic fairness, this bill would still be languishing in committee. So thank you, Corey Johnson. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you on behalf of the residents of North Brooklyn and frontline communities citywide. And finally, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the memory of Mokhtar Diallo. Mokhtar Diallo was a 21-year-old Guinean immigrant who worked for sanitation salvage in the Bronx, spending his nights doing the dangerous and backbreaking work on shifts that could last up to 16 hours for a mere $40. Mokhtar was killed by the truck he was working on last November. But rather than taking responsibility for this tragedy, the company he worked for, Sanitation Salvage, engaged in a cover-up. The appalling circumstances of Mokhtar's death have finally galvanized the city to bring real reform to this industry. Intro 157 is the first step in this effort, ensuring that Mokhtar's death was not in vain. So thank you all for today, and thank you to everybody that's here.
Huge congratulations to Councilmember Reynoso. I also want to say this may be the most interesting bill signing we've had yet, because I have never been handed a cupcake at a bill signing before. So this is you got a whole new thing going here. This is good. Councilmember Steve Levin, you heard selfless in the way he's approached this, which is so typical of him. But also, this is not selfless in one way, in that he represents communities directly that have also borne the brunt of this inequity. And you've had a long fight, but you saw it through. Pleasure to introduce Councilmember Steve Levin.
All right, Steve.
Well, thank you, Mayor. It's a great thrill to be here today. As you've heard from the mayor and from Councilmember Reynoso and Speaker Johnson and Commissioner Garcia, this bill's passage was never assured. In fact, there were a lot of times when we thought that this bill would never pass because of the forces that were stacked against it. And this bill started out as Intro 1170. It was introduced by Councilmember Reyna. In the Speaker Quinn's tenure, and then it was 495, A, B, C, maybe I don't know, D, and then it's 157, A, B, and now C. Yeah. That's how much thought went into this legislation. That's how much collaboration went into this legislation, and it's a difficult bill because it went up against entrenched forces. It went up against the history, as Antonio said, of environmental racism in our city. That's what it's been. The siting of 80% of the waste transfer stations in 3 communities across New York City over a couple of generations was done because the powers that be thought it was okay, and the private industry that drove that. Had all the incentive in the world to do it. And this bill's passage today is finally saying this bill signing today into law is finally saying that we're not going to allow that anymore. We're not going to allow communities of color throughout New York City to bear the brunt of everybody else's garbage or everybody else's waste, that we want fair share across New York City. And I want to acknowledge, as Antonio did, our speaker, Corey Johnson, who took this on, as Antonio said, with real moral clarity. He didn't say, oh, well, who's lined up against it, who's in favor of it, and maybe the politics don't work out, or maybe just wait till next year, wait till the year after. He said, we're going to take this on now, and we're going to pass this bill now. And that takes real courage. As Antonio said, this bill in 2013 needed 34 votes because Mayor Bloomberg would not even take a look at it. He wouldn't negotiate. He wouldn't engage in good faith. And that all changed with the election of Mayor de Blasio, who took this on and said, you know what? This is a real issue. This is something that impacts real people's lives. This impacts real communities. And working with his fantastic Commissioner of Sanitation, yes, Commissioner Garcia, fantastic, worked with us, worked with the council, worked with our committee staff, and really dug down and said, how do we make this bill work? How do we make this bill practicable? How do we make it impactful? We just owe such a debt of gratitude to Commissioner Garcia for not brushing off this bill, but really engaging and making it a better bill, making it a bill that's going to have long-term impact. So, Commissioner, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Obviously, to Councilmember Reynoso and his predecessor, Councilmember Diana Reyna, who were, we often say laser focused. An elected official is laser focused on an issue. Antonio and Diana have truly been laser focused. This has been top priority from day one for Antonio. And he has put all of his efforts behind it. He's put all of his political capital behind it. He has made sure that this is going to be a legacy for his time in office. And Antonio, thank you. Thank you for your amazing commitment, your amazing passion, and your dedication to environmental justice. All of the advocates, Teamsters, Joint Council 16, George Miranda.
Yeah.
See my friend Heather Bodwin, who's here, who was just so dedicated to this. The New York Lawyers for Public Interest,
yes,
who have just been phenomenal. Rachel Spector, Melissa Ishan, Justin Wood, Gavin Kearney, who's not here anymore. Gavin worked on this bill years ago. The amazing council staff that's here who worked on this bill. Fantastic council staff who really just did a phenomenal job. I also want to acknowledge the National Resources Defense Council, Eric Goldstein. Nija, we have Eddie Batista here. I want to thank Priya, who's also here, who just was really instrumental in galvanizing folks. Our wonderful friends at St. Nick's Alliance, who have been so instrumental. Rolando Guzman, thank you, Rolando. To me, really, very importantly here, I want to thank Outrage. I want to thank Outrage, who has been Allison Cordero brought me to my first Outrage meeting probably 12 years ago. I was like in my mid-20s at the time. Their dedication to this issue has spanned generations and has continued in the face of long odds. And so I have to acknowledge your tenacity and your dedication. So really, I want to. I think that this bill, in a lot of ways, in addition to honoring the memory of Mukhtar Diallo, is I really want to dedicate this also to the commitment of Outrage and all the other community groups that have put up, been on the front line day after day. And with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor. Mayor, thank you so much for your dedication. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. So Eddie Bautista's been on this mission for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember talking about some of the related issues going back as far as 2002. And important stuff we did way back when in the city council. So it's kind of, life is long, Eddie Bautista. Life is long, and we've gotten to this day. But I want to congratulate you for extraordinary leadership and for galvanizing grassroots support for this. The Executive Director of New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, Eddie Bautista.
Eddie.
Thank you. Dr. King said that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And I just want to give you guys a sense of just how long this fight has been. I started working on this in 1991.
Wow.
The beginning of the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, when I was a young organizer with New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. And I've had a lot of garbage meetings over the years, for real, about this issue and just garbage meetings, but I've had a lot of solid waste meetings over the years. One of the first meetings I had in 1991 was with another young, up-and-coming political person. He was the chief of staff for a long-forgotten council person. And I remember when I walked in to meet him, first thing I was struck by was just how tall this young professional was. And I remember being struck by how personable and also how focused he was on justice back then. And had you told me that that young staffer, I would be sitting with him while he signs this into law as mayor 27 years later, never would have. So thank you, Mayor de Blasio.
That was very kind, except it was 1994.
1994.
1994.
Okay, you see, that's how long it is.
But
you
it's still a
forget.
hell of a long time ago.
Exactly.
24 years ago.
Yes,
no, wait,
sir.
more. Someone help me.
25.
25? A long time ago.
Yes.
When my hair was as black as the council
Yes.
members
Oh,
was
yes.
back then. That's so long. Look, I mean, what this path indicates is that, you know, for a city, a nation, in many ways where equity, issues of basic justice have been so elusive, that change, transformational change based on justice takes a long time, right? And we could look at it in terms of environmental justice. We could look at it in terms of housing for low-income New Yorkers and homeless New Yorkers. You could look at it from jail sightings. There are all kinds of indicators where there is just resistance in this city and it's somebody else's problem to deal with. And what this bill, this law today being signed indicates is that there are no more disposable communities, no more disposable people. We are all New Yorkers and we're in this together. So I will stop there. And this is the kind of campaign that only happens when people unite across all different kinds. Our political leaders, had this not been, and by the way, the political leaders that have been working on this, some of us have had a saying that this fight was so hard, you have to raise the elected officials. And Antonio Reynoso grew up under the shadow of this injustice and rose to become the sanitation committee chair, never forgot where he came from, and knew who he had to deliver justice for. So Antonio, thank you. Steve, thank you. Mayor, thank you. And Speaker Johnson, looking forward to a lot more. And before I turn it over back to the mayor, as everyone has said, this is the first step. We've got more to do. We create too much waste as a city.
Yep.
If we get to commercial waste zones, which is going to be the next fight, believe me, we're going to be talking about justice. We're going to be talking about environmental and economic justice. And we're going to be talking about, finally, all those communities outside of New York where we send our waste, they're looking for justice too. And commercial waste zones will get us there. So thank you.
Well, Eddie, I can say all these years later, You haven't changed, and that's a compliment. Congratulations for staying on the mission. The last speaker is not only important in what he has done, but he also symbolizes something we've seen in the last few weeks that's very, very powerful. You know, we were in Union Square last week, and we talked about the really extraordinary role that a union played in the fight for fairness for drivers, and that was 32BJ SEIU. And that was a fight that had justice ramifications far beyond any question of a union membership. And I want to say, as I introduced George Miranda, that what the Teamsters did here in support of this legislation goes far beyond just the interests of union members, but it is about a larger sense of labor's role in the bigger community and fighting for changes that affect all working people. So I'm very, very proud to introduce the president of Teamsters, Joint Council 16, who organized a lot of labor support for this legislation, George Miranda.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for those kind words. This is a big day for workers and communities who have been campaigning for years to come up to clean private carding. On behalf of the Teamsters members in private sanitation industry and the Department of Sanitation, I want to thank Mayor de Blasio, Council Speaker Johnson, Council members Reynoso and Levin, and Commissioner Garcia. These low-income communities, these communities of color, have been suffering too long with an unfair number of trash facilities. As a Puerto Rican who grew up in the South Bronx, I know how it feels to live next to all of the things more powerful neighborhoods never had to do. When it comes to trash, we are saying not anymore. But this is only the first step. We got waste equity, but this industry needs much bigger reforms to protect the workers, to protect the pedestrians, to protect small businesses. It seems like just about every week there's another story about a private carding company violating the law or getting into a bad crash. The commercial waste zone policy has the potential to transform this industry so that we have good wages, safe jobs for workers, and prevent fatal crashes, and get a fair deal for small businesses. Thank you to the Mayor, the Speaker, your Council members Reynoso and Levin, and Commissioner Garcia for taking this important step today. And I want to thank you all for your gracious invite to this event here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We bring them along everywhere.
Okay, everyone. It's been a long, long journey.
Yep.
But I think it's time to sign this bill, don't you?
Yeah.
So come on up. Anyone who wants to be up here with us, come on up. No, behind you. Got it. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed your...
Okay, Mr. Reynoso, where are you? Huh? 3? 36. Okay, Reynoso. Right there, brother.
I'm right here.
Right there. Where's Levin? Where's Levin? Come on, Levin, I got to be able to see you.
Yeah, I'm right here. I'm right here. We're here. Behind Antonio.
Steve, this is your second big bill signing.
Okay, everyone else coming back here? Anyone coming back? It's your chance. Okay, here we go. Come on, guys. Get down, brother. Get down. We got to... Okay. Mr. Reynoso. Yeah! There you go. Mr. Levin, where are you? Well done, brother. Well done. Well done. Where is the speaker? Mr. Speaker, well done. Well done. Well done. All right. Concepcion, where are you? There you go. Well done. Okay. Eddie, where are you? Eddie. You get it, brother. It actually happened. Okay. Where's George Miranda? George Miranda, there you are, brother.
Thank you.
Catherine Garcia, where are you? There you go. Okay, now, spread them around, Antonio. Here you go. I'm going to start giving to you.
All right.
We got a lot
Right here.
of pens.
Our lawyers. Where's Rolando?
Come on. You got to go faster.
Gonna give it to some of the outrage
Okay.
members for all the work that they've
I'm
done.
going to just start handing them out to people who want them.
Thanks, Mike.
You got to keep moving fast. We got a lot of pens.
Over here. Bernadette.
Antonio, para acá.
I'm so sorry, I'm slow.
He is just not good at giving out pens.
Reynoso.
Where is Allison? Yeah, help out that way. Thank you. Where's Allison?
Reynoso.
All right. Welcome.
Ay, María.
El Puente. Pass this over to the. That was the one that I painted. There you go. Allison's over here. Give that to Allison.
Allison.
There you go.
Hey,
Getting some rhythm now.
That's the council stop as well.
dame esta, dame esta.
It has invisible ink in it. Back here. We have a lot more coming. We will. Here, you can take one from the front. Where's Danielle? Danielle! Give this to Danielle. Pass this to Danielle. Oh, we'll get there. Give it up, give it up. One more. That's it over there. Did everyone hear that one? All right, good.
Oh my God, Antonio, you need a new job, brother.
Danielle, thank you so much for your coverage. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. No passing that one. Keep going. Give one over there to the Teamsters. Where's the council staff? Council staff. I'm gonna hold some for council staff.
You can hold them if you need them. This is the end of the line. Hold on to those. Okay, this is the one.
This is the last one.
And ready, everybody? Ready, ready, ready?
Yes.
Ready? It still is now locked.
Yes.
We made it. We made it. All right.
Now it's time to get to work.
Sure, sure. How you doing? Good to see you. How you doing? You gonna take a picture? Turn around. Hey, brother. How you doing, brother? It's good to see you. How's it going? Who's gonna take it? He's gonna take it right there. Got it? You got it? You got it? Okay. Okay.
No.
It's good to see you. There you go.
I'm gonna head out.
All right, brother.
Good luck. All right, thank you for this. This is good. This is great.
You got it done. Thank you, my dear. Great job. I will.
I love her. I love her. Because we're in education together. So.
I'm going to tell her that. I'm going to tell her that. Thank you. Okay, here we go.
What's it? Bill, this is Alejandro, my son.
Alejandro.
Alex, say hi to the man.
It's okay.
My son Will.
Hace tiempo. How's it going?
It's pretty cool.
He likes to go to.
Yeah. Cuba, we had meetings in Cuba. I remember you guys are right there at
All good, brother.
the beginning of all the transfer stations. Yeah.
And you're the one that has
Guys, let's go this way.
See you again.
Well done.
Oh, yeah.
Well done. I look forward
You
to
did a
talking
great
to you a
job.
call. Look forward to catching
Please.
up.
Please look.
Good man.
Mayor, thank you. Big week.
Big week, brother.
I don't have an organization.
Okay. Yeah.
On top of
So you might want to stay for that. We want to keep Reynoso and Corey for the on topic. Right? Make sure Reynoso's trying to get away. He should know he wants to do the on topic.
I'll stay for the off topic if you want me to.
They don't do it on topic. They want to get out of here.
You're right. Off topic. There? Gotta talk to, I'm talking to, I'll talk to you. Mike's up.
Ready? Set up.
That's why. Mayor, thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
Congratulations. Haven't seen you since June. So,
There you go.
Jerry Owens is coming back in town.
Oh, he was amazing.
Isn't he? No, I have the Photoshop of you giving him the gift.
Yeah. I'd love to talk to him when he gets back.
He's coming in the second week of September. Allison brought 14th. We're having a series of meetings, so if you want me to...
I'm getting out of here.
Just give me a call. I'd love to see him.
The agenda issue thing is really the agenda of reconciliation.
Para una vez que uno está aquí sentado hay que aprovechar.
All right. Okay, we're about to get going here. Ready? Ready? Okay, everybody. We are going to take questions related to this legislation and this issue, and then I'll be taking questions on other topics as well. On this issue, the bill signing today, media questions, thank you, Eric. Media questions, anything related to the legislation we have signed today. Back there. Speak up.
Yeah, so I've looked at the environmental impact study, and it mentioned it's pretty clear that only half of the stations will be forced to divert their...
I heard you up to then. We're pretty clear that.
Only half of the waste transfer stations affected will have to actually divert their waste. So where do you expect most of it to get diverted, and also what's to prevent it from going to the other stations within the same district?
Catherine, you want to start with that?
Certainly. So, as we did in the analytics on the EAS, we anticipate that a portion of it will definitely be moving out of those districts and into other districts within the city, and that is why we put the cap on the 10%. We also anticipate that some of it may move outside of the city. So that is where we think that the waste will go. That is what we... so there are transfer stations in other boroughs, in other portions of other boroughs, and that is where we would think that it would go.
Antonio.
And if they do stay within the district, they're going to stay in transfer stations that have been incentivized through rail, barge, and high recycling rates. So what we want to do is make sure that we promote the people that are doing a good job with high recycling rates that have barge or that have rail. So even if it moves within the district, it'll be moving out of the city in a more justice-centric way.
That's a good word. Justice-centric. I like that.
I promise.
Okay, media questions on this? Yes.
I went over the numbers with the commissioner's staff.
A little bit louder, I'm sorry.
I went over the numbers with the commissioner's staff this morning, and my understanding from that is that currently 73% of the city's trash goes to these three communities. After this is fully implemented, that number will be approximately 69%. In the best scenario, 66%. So it's not a huge difference here. Antonio and the mayor, I'd like you to sort of put that in context. I mean, there's a lot of celebration here, but from one point of view, It's not such a big change.
Absolutely. So, well, it's a huge change. What you're not seeing is something called unused capacity. What we have is about 40,000 tons of trash in the city of New York. And 20,000 of that doesn't get used. And what happens anytime our great commissioner, for example, comes out with a new initiative or a new mode of recycling that we want to take on, it always gets sent to our districts as a pilot. It always gets sent to our districts with the waste transfer stations that we have. And what we're doing now is saying that if that does happen, it has to go somewhere else. So you can see that almost as a cap to some degree. The stations that are going to be losing significant amounts of capacity or throughput, actual throughput, are stations that are older trucks, have a shoddy record with workers, and we want to de-incentivize those folks from working. So you might not see it, but the unused capacity being gone is a significant help for the future of this district. And 6% is also significant, especially in the Bronx, in my district, and in Southeast Queens. Any trucks off the streets are a good thing. And I just want to say the last thing is, we do have the swamp plan as well. And the swamp plan is also diverting a significant amount of trash outside of our districts as well. So cumulatively, when this is joined with other initiatives that we're taking on related to trash, it makes a huge difference in these communities of color.
Yeah, I want to add to that, and then Catherine, if there's anything else you want to note. 150 trucks per day out of a handful of communities is a big deal in those communities. That's just a factual reality. Every truck fewer is good for the communities. Two, the fact that there's a cap for the first time guarantees a future of more fairness. And three, we're going to drive that overall amount of waste down across the board so that there will be additional progress because we're just going to relentlessly reduce the total. But, you know, this is a step along the way. We are all committed to going as far as we possibly can to create fairness in this area. You want to add?
No, I mean, I would concur with what both the mayor and the councilman said. This is a big deal. As the swamp plan that passed in 2006 was also a really big deal. And that has meant hundreds of trucks not in this neighborhood and not in other neighborhoods of color. So we look forward to continuing to work towards more equity all the time, but we really want to celebrate the fact that this makes a big difference to the neighbor that is next to a transfer station, particularly one that could be within a few hundred feet of a transfer station.
Other questions from media on today's bill signing? I want to see if there's anything else. Media once, twice, 3 times. Okay, I know my elected colleagues have to go.
Yes, good luck.
I thank you, congratulations. One more big round of applause for Antonio and Corey. Okay, let's go to other topics. Rich.
Mr. Mayor,
hey, everybody, keep it down. We're still going here. Rich.
Mr. Mayor, criticizing President Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again." Governor Cuomo said America was never that great. Do you find yourself on the same page as the governor on this?
No, look, no, I don't, but I also want to say I assume he misspoke. I've heard he issued some kind of correction. I haven't seen that. But I think it's really important to speak to the underlying issue. America is great. America has been great. We have a lot of work to do in America to make it a more fair and just country. But that doesn't take away from our greatness. The concept of America is great. And a lot of our history is, and there's some parts of our history that we have to be blunt about how far we were from our ideals, but the greatness has never been in question to me. You know, I have a particular perspective because my parents were from the legendary greatest generation. You know, my dad fought in World War II and my mom worked in the war effort too, and you know, coming up with those influences, it never was a question in my mind that America is and was great. And I never liked Trump's slogan because I thought it took away the notion that right now, right here, we are a great country. I thought it was in its own way unpatriotic to say we had to be great again when we're great right now. But if anyone says, are we done? No, we're far from done. There's still a huge amount of injustice that has to be addressed at the same time.
Mayor, there was a rally today, COBA, the Correctional Officers Union, on the steps of City Hall, and their message was that they were arguing that your administration cares more about shopping at jails
more about what, please? I'm sorry?
That your administration cares more about shopping opportunities at jails.
I don't know what that means.
I think the discussion about the siting of new jails, having retail.
That's weird. Go ahead.
Cares more about that than officers that are being assaulted.
Look, I don't know why the union wants to reduce to that kind of ridiculous rhetoric a very serious issue. We care deeply about our correction officers. We have hired a huge number of correction officers and provided them with a lot more training than they ever got before. We've provided a huge amount of overtime when it was needed. We've tried to make huge physical improvements in our correction system, and ultimately will make the biggest improvement by getting off of Rikers Island. And look, I'm sick to my stomach anytime one of our correction officers is attacked. It's unacceptable. But the other thing we've done, working closely with the Bronx DA, is ensure that there's much greater consequences for any inmate who attacks an officer than there have been in a long, long time. And those inmates are rearrested and charged with additional offenses that can mean many more years in prison. So that said, we've got more work to do. I need to tell our correction officers that I honor their work, and we have to do more to keep them safe, because there should not be any of these incidents. Yes?
Mayor de Blasio, I wanted to ask about the DOE Yeshiva report and letter. So it's sort of a two-part. The first is that I guess some within the Hasidic community say that the DOE investigation wasn't thorough or timely, and that you're kind of looking for a way out of actual education within the Hasidic yeshivas because of a powerful voting bloc. That's what some people say. And the second part is, the investigators found that some schools weren't using the new secular curriculum that they promised to use. So why not come down hard on that, and why not push for more fair education first?
First of all, I would really prefer people just ask, no disrespect to you, but for those who want to criticize, ask the question, what did we do and why did we do it? And what we did was a very thorough, careful dialogue to achieve change. I have worked with the Orthodox community for decades. And I know both a lot about the community, but I also understand the legal context in this country of respecting the fact that there is freedom of religion, and that a school with a religious basis needs to be addressed with sensitivity, while simultaneously achieving our goal of ensuring that every child gets the kind of education they deserve. We engaged in a dialogue with a number of schools that I think was very productive and resulted in real changes. So in the universe of schools that really qualified here, about half of them, I believe it was 15 exactly, welcomed us in, participated in an ongoing dialogue, made a number of changes, and according to our educational leaders, are doing well and/or are making additional changes to do better. There's another 15 that would not allow DOE officials in the door, and that to me is not an acceptable state of affairs. Now, we made very clear to community leaders as we were about to send the letter that we would be explicit about which yeshivas would not invite people in, and we suddenly got a communication saying some of them now will invite our DOE officials in. I offer an open hand. Give us that appointment as early as next week. We're ready to be there and to address these issues. But any school that doesn't, I think, is making a huge mistake, because it sends a message that they're not trying to address the underlying issue. And now, because of particularly the new legislation that was passed in Albany, but also because of the role that the state education department plays in general, we need guidance on the next steps. My view is the 15, that first 15, really are on track. The second 15, we need to understand what our parameters are and what our prerogatives are. And that's what we're asking SED to provide. Yeah. Louder.
Mayor, I understand you felt that the governor might have misspoke about his comments about America.
Right.
Do you think he owes the public an apology?
Again, I have not seen his clarification. I think he should make very clear that he thinks this is a great country, because it is a great country. At the same time, if he's saying that this country needs more work, he's right about that. Yes?
The yeshiva investigation. In the report, it says that DOE officials only visited 3 science classes across all of the schools that they were in. They, as you mentioned, they haven't even been able to get inside half of them. I guess to follow up on Katie's question, there are people who have been raising this issue, groups like Yafet, who feel like the investigation feels a little toothless to them if you're not even going into science classes in every school that you went into. Why isn't the DOE sitting in on every kind
Again, I'm not here to micromanage what our educators have done to assess schools. They're very serious about this work. If they feel a school is where we need it to be or getting to that point soon because of the dialogue, because there was a real discussion of what kind of professional development was needed. And you see in that letter the issues of professional development raised early in the trajectory, which led to real changes, which led to a lot of the yeshivas participating in professional development they had not done before. You see curricular changes, all sorts of things going on. The goal was to make the schools as good as they should be to meet the standards. And I know, I actually empathize with the concept that might be felt amongst the media of wanting some instant gratification on this. I understand that. If you say, well, is it, well, but I want you to hear what I'm saying. If you say, well, we hear an allegation, we'd like it resolved immediately. Our sense of mission was to get the job done. And my experience with the community was that it was right to engage in a detailed dialogue to figure out how to move things. We're talking about 30 schools. We're not talking about, you know, a massive number of schools against the you know, almost, we don't have 2,000, but we have well over 1,000 schools in our system. What I feel is where that dialogue happened, we got real results, and that's what we were there to do. We were not trying to shame people. We were trying to get the job done. And I feel very good about those 15 schools. I don't feel good about the other 15. And it's time for that to be resolved. So they should all invite DOE in immediately, and SED now needs to tell us what we can do if they don't.
You know, and what other, I guess I don't understand how they can not let you in for 2 years.
Because of the very point I made. Just look that you can, there's different interpretations of law, but it's clear to us, first of all, again, when you're talking about religion in America, there are rights under all concepts of civil liberties. But also, when you look at the laws governing schools that are not public, we don't have the ability to force our way in physically. You know, that's why we're turning to SED now after what has been unquestionably substantial engagement to say, okay, what do you do when a school won't invite you in? We'd like guidance because we're ready to take whatever steps that they indicate are appropriate. Yes?
So at a City Council Transportation Committee meeting yesterday, Councilman Rodriguez proposed to your administration the idea of closing streets around schools if the city doesn't get its speed camera program back. The DOT said that doing so in all schools would be too challenging, but would you be willing to close traffic around some schools in areas that are particularly accident-prone?
Look, I appreciate the question. The first thing to do is to focus on how we solve the problem, which is as simple as 63 individuals showing up in Albany, New York, and casting a single vote. It would take them an hour. The state Senate can fix this. And I think the hue and cry is growing in this city and this state for the Senate to come back and reauthorize these speed cameras. There's no solution as good as these speed cameras. You know, we saw speeding go down 60% when we had them. Fatalities go down 55%. The minute they were gone, 2 weeks, we saw a vast amount more speeding. So we need the speed cameras. That's where our singular focus is. In the meantime, we're going to take a variety of steps in terms of other forms of enforcement, and in some cases maybe physical steps as well, to provide as much safety for our kids as we can. I can say as a parent, there are some places you could consider closing off, but there's a lot you can't because parents drop their kids off in the morning, pick them up in the afternoon, school buses come in and out. I don't think it's as simple as easily being able to close off streets. I think the bottom line here is we have the ideal enforcement mechanism. We just need our legislature to act. Other questions? Yes, sir.
If I could also ask Commissioner Garcia, but with the signing of this bill, there's also been a simultaneous ramping up of processing of organics. How does that balance out? How do you process more organics, which would require more transportation, more waste being processed at these facilities with the signing of the bill?
So under the bill, organics and recycling are carved out, but otherwise it is part of the overall permit reduction. So we hope to continue to grow the organics program and see more tonnage, but that is accounted for within the legislation.
cause any more traffic or any more process for these?
So in terms of the way that we structured the legislation, when the reduction happens and what the EIS looked at was the assumption that there would be organics processing in some of these communities, but not in all of them.
Okay, last call. Any other questions? Going once, twice? Yes, Jillian.
I guess to go back to the yeshiva, sorry.
Please.
You know, I guess I understand the point that it takes time and dialogue and engagement, but what would you say to some of the advocates who have been really vocal on this issue and who feel that in the meantime there are children going to these schools and perhaps not getting the level of education that they're entitled to under the law?
The perhaps is the crucial point.
They are.
Right, but I'm saying, I just want to say, there's two sides to every story. We have 15 schools where we went in. A lot of work was done. Clearly there was room for improvement, but I have to be straightforward and say there's room for improvement in a lot of our traditional public schools too. What we found was a willingness to work with us, and then in the letter you see real progress, very specific actions that were taken, specific changes agreed to, and we feel in those 15 schools they are either where they need to be or they will be soon. That was the mission. And it was not gotcha. It was not the advocates are 100% right or the yeshivas are 100% right. It was our educators had to feel the schools were providing the education the kids deserved under the law. In those 15 schools, we feel they're on the right track. In the other 15, we don't know, and we're unhappy about that because it would have been really easy to invite us in. I think that the decision to say, time's up, we've given people all the chance in the world to cooperate, we're being very public about which schools cooperated and which didn't, has suddenly jarred some of these schools into offering that they will open their doors. I want to see that happen. I want to see DOE senior officials inside those schools. If they're not truly invited inside those schools, I think it'll be a huge mistake for those yeshivas. But the only way we can know what happens next if they don't allow us in is to get guidance from the legally designated entity, which is the State Education Department. Yeah, wait, two. Go ahead, Gloria.
Ask your personal position from having worked with the yeshiva community and having represented them in the past. Do you personally believe that the level of education that children are getting in yeshivas is good enough and that they are in fact prepared for the rest of the normal?
Yeah, I have a very particular view, meaning if you asked me that question 25 years ago and I was looking at the news coverage, I might have assumptions and stereotypes, but then I spent a long time working with the community and I came to a very simple conclusion. Every yeshiva is different. And there are some that I believe, especially from the direct findings of our educators, are doing a fine job. And I wouldn't be surprised there are some that are not putting the emphasis they need on some areas of the curriculum and that need to do better. But I want to go by facts, not by assumptions. I do know every yeshiva is different.
Mayor, on the Rikers plan and the potential for ground floor retail, why do you think something like that would be successful, and what type of retailers do you see the city trying to attract?
I'm not an expert on jail design. I think the notion is that since we're going to be building brand new buildings in 4 communities, several of which are really well-trafficked areas, that retail could work and that it's part of connecting the building to the community in a productive way. But the bottom line is that to me is a small issue compared to the bigger issue. The bigger issue is we need to get off Rikers Island. We're going to have these community-based facilities. They will be modern. They will be focused on rehabilitation. They'll help inmates stay connected to family, which is also part of rehabilitation. And I give the City Council a lot of credit. There's absolute consistency in the approach that we're going to move these and get this done. Let me see, I saw one other hand. Wait.
Where do you stand on the homeless shelter situation in Glendale?
Say it again louder.
Homeless shelter situation in Glendale. Do you think that that area is going to have a homeless shelter eventually?
The broad statement I'd make is if you look at the plan we issued early last year, we said that we need every area to have the shelter capacity consistent with the number of people who come from that community and are in our shelter system. That's what we intend to do. and further to make sure over time that the folks who live in the shelters increasingly come from that immediate community board and the surrounding community boards. So there's a lot of detailed discussion going on about exact sites, but the bottom line is the vision is quite clear and we will fulfill that vision. I saw one more or two more? I saw two more. First you, and then Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, following recent reports about not just sanitation salvage, but also Century Waste Connection.
Just pump it up a little bit. I gotta hear you better.
Following the recent reports about not just the sanitation salvage accident, but also the recent report on Century Waste, its connection to the mob, do you think still that BIC is living up to its promises as an agency to be cracking down on persons?
I think we are about to do a lot on this issue, both on the zoning issue, which I was thrilled to hear the energy that the speaker feels on that issue, which will be very helpful. But I've also spoken to him about giving BIC stronger powers of enforcement and stronger penalties they can apply, which I think they need. So I think BIC does a good job, but also needs better tools.
To belabor the yeshiva point.
Please, so long as you know you're belaboring it.
Yeah, it's, how can you say that some yeshivas are on the right track when the DOE's own letter said that they didn't even give the DOE their full curricula, and some of them aren't even using the secular education? It just seems for students who happen to...
I can say it because I've asked the chancellor and other senior educators what their assessment was of those 15 yeshivas. And I'm sure they'll be happy to go into greater detail with you. But the bottom line was, their categorization was that those yeshivas either had already reached a standard that fulfilled what the law required, or were moving toward it steadily, and we're accepting the recommendations that the DOE has given them, and we're making the changes. And that's the name of the game. Again, I hate to say this because the truth is the truth, and some of our own schools on the traditional public side need real work, but the parallel bears making. We have schools that also are in a process of evolution that we are pushing harder to do better and taking steps to make stronger. So if we think a school is either there or getting there consistently, that's what we need to see, and that's what the educators believe. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, everybody.